The Curse of the Black Hunter. Prologue. The forest was ancient, holding its breath before the storm. At its heart stood a half-ruined temple, surrounded by shadows that moved with a life of their own. No one had dared to step foot here for centuries, except for him. Deep within the thicket, a low growl echoed. The hunter lifted his gaze to the crimson moon, which promised only one thing: a night of hunger and bloodlust. Chapter 1. A stranger in town. Hector Blake arrived in the small town of Ravenhill, hiding from his fate. There was a weariness in his eyes and a darkness in his heart, one that no one could ever discover. He tried to appear ordinary, but the townsfolk sensed something was off about him. That first night, he awoke to a strange scent, a mixture of rot, damp earth, and something ancient. Peering out the window, he saw a cloaked figure standing motionless on the street, as if waiting for something. The next day, whispers filled the town's bar. "Did you hear?" Another body was found near the old mill, torn apart. Hector clenched his fists. He knew then he wasn't alone. Chapter 2. The Legend of the Black Hunter. The town's elders spoke in hushed voices of the Black Hunter, a cursed being that lurked in the shadows, bringing death to any who met its gaze. Hector knew the truth. The hunter was him. The curse had followed him for decades, ever since he had stepped into a forgotten temple that should never have existed. But now, he felt something else in the air, something hungrier, something crueler, and it was hunting him. Chapter 3. The Dark Awakening. That night, an eerie silence fell over the town. Hector woke to the sound of footsteps just beyond his door. His instincts flared. Rising swiftly, he unlatched the lock and yanked the door open. A man stood before him, face concealed beneath a hood. But Hector didn't need to see his face. The scent told him everything. This was the same stench from that night in the forest. "You've been running for a long time, but it's time to pay your dues," the stranger rasped, his voice dry and hollow, like something long dead. Hector had no chance to respond. A brutal strike sent him crashing backward. Pain erupted through his body. Bones cracked, muscles tore, and his skin stretched impossibly tight. The curse had awakened, and yet the stranger didn't move. Chapter 4. The Bloody Trail. When Hector regained consciousness, he lay amidst the wreckage of his own home. The scent of blood thickened the air. Broken furniture littered the room, walls lay in ruin, and a body lay sprawled on the floor. But something was wrong. On the far wall, carved deep with claw marks, a single word burned into the wood: hunt. A chill ran down Hector's spine. The hunt had begun. Chapter 5. The hunt begins. Groaning, Hector pushed himself off the floor, his entire body aching. He looked down at the mangled corpse. The stranger's limbs were twisted at unnatural angles, his face frozen in terror. But something felt off. There was barely any blood. Frowning, Hector crouched, inspecting the remains. The man's skin looked strange, withered, as if something had drained him dry. He turned toward the wall where the word hunt had been etched, and suddenly, pain lanced through his skull. A vision struck him. A hooded figure hunched over a blood-stained altar. Ancient symbols pulsating with a crimson glow. And a voice whispering from the abyss: "You think you can escape your fate, Black Hunter. You are no hunter. You are prey." Hector's breath caught. He staggered to his feet, gripping his head. The vision vanished, but the unease remained. He needed to leave. Now grabbing only the essentials, money, a knife, and the old amulet that had once held his curse at bay, he stepped out into the night. The sky was ink black. The air smelled of an impending storm, though no rain fell. A cold shiver ran down his spine. Someone was watching him. Chapter 6. the beast's trail. He moved swiftly, weaving through the city's narrow alleys, trying to make his way toward the forest. The farther he was from people, the better. But the moment he turned a corner, a tall figure emerged in his path. "You're wasting your time running." The voice was low, almost animalistic. Hector froze. The man before him was tall, massive, but not entirely human. His skin had a grayish, corpse-like hue, and his eyes glowed with a yellow, lupine light. Clawed fingers flexed slowly, preparing for an attack. "Who the hell are you?" Hector felt the beast inside him stir. "I'm the one who came for you," the stranger sneered, revealing sharp, predatory teeth. Hector barely had time to react. The next second, a force beyond human strength slammed into him, hurling him backward. He crashed against a brick wall, pain searing through his back as he let out a sharp hiss. The stranger took a step forward, but then suddenly halted. A sound echoed through the alley, a deep, piercing howl. And it wasn't Hector's. They were here. The stranger turned sharply and vanished into the darkness. Hector pushed himself up, feeling the beast inside him clawing its way to the surface. Now he knew for certain he wasn't the only monster in this city. But who was hunting him? Chapter 7. Tracks in the Dark. Hector stood in the alley, his breath heavy. The darkness pressed in around him, alive and suffocating. The distant hum of the city barely reached this narrow stone trap where an eerie silence reigned. They were here. He sensed movement to his left, swift, fluid, inhuman. Hector didn't wait. He pushed off the wall and lunged forward. The shadows shifted. A hand shot out from the darkness, aiming for his throat. He ducked just in time, the air slicing past his ear, and twisted, striking back with a powerful punch. Bone cracked under his knuckles, but the creature didn't flinch. Hector leaped backward, eyes scanning the darkness. A figure stepped into the dim light. A man, tall, gaunt, his skin ashen like dust. But his eyes, they were wrong, lifeless, entirely black. "The Black Hunter," the stranger hissed, tilting his head as if studying him. "We've been waiting for you." Hector said nothing. He could feel the curse inside him stirring, demanding release. "Who are you?" His voice was low, wary. "The hounds, those who follow the scent of blood." Hector clenched his fists. "So you came for me?" "No," the figure grinned, baring jagged teeth. "We came for the one who's coming for you." Hector frowned. But before he could respond, the darkness behind him erupted with movement. Something massive and unnatural burst from the alley with a furious roar. They had found him. Chapter 8. The Hunter Becomes the Prey. Hector barely managed to leap aside before the creature crashed down where he had just stood. The asphalt beneath its claws cracked like shattered glass. A hound. Enormous, covered in thick black fur, its glowing red eyes locked onto him with hunger. Its body was too elongated, its joints twisted at impossible angles. Its maw, brimming with jagged teeth, curled into a grotesque grin. Hector hissed. The beast within him roared in response. The hound struck first. It lunged, clawed limbs slashing through the air, tearing the space between them apart. Hector tried to evade, but he was too late. Pain exploded in his side as razor-sharp claws ripped deep wounds into his flesh. But Hector was no longer human. The roar that tore from his chest was not a man's. It was a wolf's. Bones cracked, muscles tore. In the blink of an eye, he transformed. Dark fur, powerful limbs, fangs made for ripping and tearing. The hunter had awakened. The hound snarled, but it was already too late. Hector lunged, sinking his claws deep into the beast's flesh. It howled, writhing, but he was faster, his jaws clamped around its throat, tearing it apart. The creature collapsed, twitched once, twice, then disintegrated into ash. Hector slowly lifted his head. The hound he had slain was not the only one. More figures emerged from the shadows. Dozens of glowing eyes stared at him from the abyss. The hunt was far from over. Chapter 9. Into the Maw of Darkness. Hector stood in the middle of the narrow alleyway, his beastly breath heavy in the air. Blood still dripped from his claws, but he already knew. It meant nothing. The hound he had torn apart was only the first. From the shadows, others emerged. Their eyes glowed with a dim, crimson light, their gaping maws filled with rows upon rows of jagged fangs. Long, razor-sharp claws scraped against the cobblestones. There were at least 10 of them. Hector felt the beast inside him growl. Instinct screamed at him to run, but the pride of the hunter would not allow it. "What do you want?" His voice was deep, more of a growl than a question. The hounds didn't answer. They simply advanced, slowly tightening the circle around him. Hector knew that if he stayed, they would tear him apart. But if he ran, it would only delay the inevitable. He had no choice. He had to fight. Chapter 10. The Bloodied Battle. The first hound leapt. Hector lunged forward, slamming his shoulder into the creature mid-air. Their bodies collided with a force that made the alley walls tremble. The hound howled, but before it could recover, Hector's claws sank deep into its throat, ripping it apart. But the others didn't wait. One of them lunged from the side, sinking its fangs into his arm. Another struck from below, aiming for his gut. A third came crashing down from above. Pain tore through his body, but he didn't stop. A furious roar shattered the night. He spun, tearing through his enemies, rending flesh and bone. Blood splattered across the cold stone ground. The hounds screeched, but there were too many of them. Another strike. Claws slashed across his side, and for a split second, his vision blurred. "I can't." Somewhere in the distance, he heard footsteps. Someone was watching. Just before the darkness swallowed him, he caught a glimpse of a cloaked figure standing on the rooftop. "Who are you?" Chapter 11. Shadows of the Past. When Hector regained consciousness, the first thing he noticed was the scent of wood, grass, and blood. He was in a forest. Pain crashed over him like a wave, but he managed to sit up. His clothes were in tatters, his body covered in wounds. And he wasn't alone. A man sat nearby, next to a small fire, tall and gaunt, with long silver hair. His face was lined with scars, and in his hands he toyed with an old, worn amulet, Hector's amulet. "You're awake, Hunter." The man's voice was deep and steady. Hector frowned. "Who are you?" The stranger smirked. "Someone who knows that you are the last link in the chain of this curse." Hector felt his heart skip a beat. "What are you talking about?" "Your fate, the hounds, the curse that has lasted for centuries." Hector said nothing. The old man lifted his gaze, the fire reflecting in his eyes. "You are not the first Black Hunter, and you will not be the last. But if you refuse to listen to me, you will die far sooner than you think." Hector clenched his fists. He needed answers. Chapter 12. The Origins of the Curse. Hector stared intently at the old man. There was an ominous truth in his words, something Hector had yet to grasp. "What do you mean?" His voice was hoarse, as if he hadn't spoken in days. The stranger tossed a dry branch into the fire, and the flames flared up, casting flickering shadows across his scarred face. "Do you really think your blood carries this curse by accident?" "No, Hunter. It began long before you were born." Hector listened in silence. "Your lineage was once one of protectors. They hunted the creatures of darkness, ensuring they never entered this world. But one of your ancestors broke the pact made with the Ancient Ones, and for that, a punishment was set in stone." Hector's jaw tightened. What punishment? The old man met his gaze, eyes glinting like embers in the dim firelight. The curse of the Black Hunter. A chill ran down Hector's spine. Every generation, one of you is born with the mark of the curse. Your body becomes stronger, faster, but your soul... He paused, his voice low and measured. Your soul belongs to the darkness. Hector clenched his fists. I don't belong to the darkness. The old man smirked faintly. They all say that, until the moment they don't. He held up Hector's amulet, fingers closing around it. This symbol is not just protection, it is a key to what you are trying to understand. Hector frowned. What does it unlock? The old man slowly rose to his feet, his shadow stretching long across the forest floor. Your fate. Chapter 13. Ghosts of the past. The night was black as pitch, as if the stars had refused to shine. The forest felt alive. Trees whispered among themselves. The wind howled through the branches, and somewhere in the distance, a beast let out a mournful wail. The old man walked ahead, his steps steady, unwavering. Hector followed in silence, no longer questioning. They walked for a long time. When they finally emerged into a clearing, Hector saw something strange. At its center stood an ancient stone altar. Its surface was etched with runes, glowing faintly with a crimson light. A tightness coiled in Hector's chest. You feel it, don't you? The old man asked, watching him closely. Hector nodded. The altar called to him. Chapter 14. The Hunter's Seal. The old man stepped forward, running his hand over the rough stone. This is where it all began. This is where your ancestor made the bargain. Hector said nothing, feeling the runes pulse in sync with his own heartbeat. You must make a choice, Hunter. The old man's voice was calm, but heavy with meaning. Continue the path of the beast, or break the chain. Hector's eyes locked onto his. How? The old man took a deep breath. You must go down there. He gestured toward a dark chasm behind the altar, a yawning hole in the earth. Hector frowned. Down? Yes, below lies the one who started this curse. If you seek freedom, you must face him. Hector swallowed hard. He knew he had no choice. It was time to confront his past. Chapter 15. Descent into Darkness. Hector stood at the edge of the chasm, gazing down at the black abyss hidden beneath the altar. He felt his body refusing to move, a chill creeping through him, down to his bones. This was more than just a place. It was a disgraceful legacy. Are you sure you want to do this? The old man's voice came from a distance. Hector remained silent. He no longer knew what could be worse than what awaited him. This was what he had been searching for, the answers that were meant to free him from the curse or consume him forever. Summoning all his will, he took a step forward. He plunged into the darkness. With each meter, the world around him became more unbearable. The passage walls closed in, the air thickened, and his breath grew heavier. The farther he went, the more he felt his strength drain away, replaced by an overwhelming fear that clouded his mind. At last, he reached the bottom. And there, at the center of the room, stood a figure. Dark and twisted, it resembled an ancient spirit woven from the night. Flames burned in its eyes, and they followed him unblinking. Hector took a step forward, and the figure spoke. You've come, Black Hunter. You've come for the truth. Hector clenched his fists. Everything inside him screamed to run, but he stood still, as if enchanted. Who are you? His voice trembled with fear. I am the one who sealed your bloodline. I am the one who sent the curse. The answer was as cold and indifferent as the darkness surrounding them. Hector felt his blood begin to boil. You did this? A roar tore from his chest. You doomed my bloodline to destruction. Why? The shadow took a step forward. Each step echoed in his mind, making his senses rebel against logic. You don't even know why. You became part of this game, Hunter. Your bloodline was chosen to hunt, to carry the curse. But like everything in this world, it was too weak to escape its fate. You're just another link in this chain. Hector closed his eyes, trying to swallow the wave of fury. But he knew he needed more than just answers. He needed to be freed. What must I do to destroy the curse? He shouted again, nearly losing his voice. The shadow laughed, and the sound was like a black abyss, swallowing every trace of light from his soul. You cannot destroy the curse, Hunter. It has become part of you. You are its bearer, its master. It raised its hand, and a black stone flickered to life in its palm. You want to be free? Then you must free me. Hector's heart stopped. He understood what it meant. You want to escape this prison? His voice trembled with shock. Yes, and you will help me. The shadow raised the stone higher, and it began to glow, its light penetrating his eyes. Hector felt his body respond to this magical surge. Something invisible tightened around his chest. Something burned inside him. He tried to resist, but his strength was fading. You cannot escape your destiny, Hunter. You are mine now. Hector staggered, his body beginning to lose its form. He felt the beast within him stir. He was on the edge. Chapter 16. The Dark Deal. The shadow stepped closer, its voice growing more commanding. It spoke words that left no room for doubt. You want to rid yourself of the curse, but you must help me. I will free you from the dark force. You will be free. But something in its words was wrong. It was manipulating him. And Hector felt his mind beginning to drift. Too late. When he raised his hand to try and stop her, his fingers turned to claws. The beast inside him awoke completely, and now his body was no longer just a shell. It had become part of this world of darkness. The shadow smirked. Too late. You've already sold your soul. You are mine now. In that moment, Hector understood. He was no longer the hunter. He was part of the curse. Chapter 17. The Rift of Realities. Hector felt his body change. He was no longer human. The beast within him, the dark entity, had fully taken control. Claws extended, and his eyes filled with a crimson glow. His heart thudded in his chest with unimaginable force, and his thoughts blurred into a fog, overwhelmed by terror. The shadow, a dark figure, stood before him, laughing. It was not a human laugh, but something greater. It was the laugh of the darkness itself. Did you really think you could defeat me, Hunter? You were nothing but a pawn in this game, it whispered, rising toward him. Hector tried to resist, but his strength was fading. The beast inside him was stronger than ever. He felt the curse tear at his body, the darkness consuming his soul. I won't give up. He gritted his teeth, fighting to suppress the beast within. But the shadow merely gazed at him with contempt. You gave up the moment you stepped here, the moment you chose to unravel this curse. You think there's a way back? Hector could no longer hold his emotions in check. He growled, his claws digging into the stone floor. His mind seemed to fracture. What was reality? What was illusion? The world around him began to shift. Forces beyond his comprehension began distorting space. The stones of the walls crumbled, transforming into shadows. There was nothing that could hold him. He felt the ground lose its solidity beneath his feet, and forms, inhuman and desiccated, began to move around him. Your bloodline is doomed, Hunter. You belong to me. We are one now, the shadow whispered. But at that moment, something incredible happened. In the deepest part of the darkness, he felt light. It was a faint light, barely visible, but its power was so immense that Hector instantly sensed it. He was not alone. Not so fast. The voice was familiar, piercing the space like a beam of light in the dark night. Before him appeared a figure, barely visible, barely tangible, but Hector recognized it. It was the figure of his ancestor, the one who had once broken the pact and brought the curse. His face was vague, like a cloud of mist, but his gaze was full of resolve. I was the one who opened the gates of the curse. I was the one who made the deal with the shadow. The words echoed in Hector's mind, not through his ears, but straight to his heart. Hector stared at the apparition. You can't defeat her unless you free yourself from yourself, his ancestor's voice whispered like the wind. How can I free myself when I am already bound? Hector asked, feeling his eyes burn brighter. You must face yourself, the one you were and the one you've become. Only then can you break the chain. Visions appeared before Hector. He saw himself, a boy running through the forest, a warrior holding a weapon for the first time, a hunter fighting monsters. All these moments suddenly merged into one picture. Clenching his teeth, Hector raised his hand and felt the dark power coil around his fingers. He knew this was his final chance. The shadow was not prepared for what he had realized. He had to free himself. I will not be your pawn, Shadow, Hector shouted, his voice echoing off the stone walls. And with that cry, the battle began. A fight not for life, but for death, against himself and the curse that clung to his soul. Chapter 18. The Fight with the Shadow. Hector charged at the shadow with wild speed. His body was now more of a monster than a man, and he felt the strength of the beast ready to consume him entirely. But in that moment, he realized he couldn't let that happen. His mind was still here. With every slash of his claws, with every growl, with every step, he felt his soul being freed. The shadow retreated. It tried to destroy him, but Hector grew stronger with each passing moment, his will unbreakable. In the end, he would not only fight the shadow, he would destroy it. But for that, there was one final battle to face, the one against the force behind the curse. Chapter 19. The Return of the Beast. Hector knelt on the ground, consumed by pain and fury. Dark threads coiled around his arms, and his claws dug furiously into the earth. He could no longer hold back the images, how the beast within him screamed, how his mind was being shattered by the darkness itself. The black abyss was pulling him in, and with every step, every breath, he felt his very essence slipping away. And in that moment, he was no longer human. He had become a werewolf. The shadow, seeing him in such a state, smirked. She knew she still held Hector in her grasp, but there was still one force within him that could change everything. You're no longer a man, Hunter. You're a beast. You belong to me. The shadow swung her arm, sending Hector crashing to the ground. But Hector rose again. His body trembled, but not from weakness. His newfound strength surged within him. He knew that every moment of his transformation was not the end. It was a new beginning. Everything he had known until now vanished. He was a beast, but this was his choice. Hector crushed the earth beneath his feet, his claws tearing through stone. Fur began to sprout across his body, his frame growing taller, broader, more terrifying. He knew that with each step, he was edging closer to his limit. But now, this was his weapon, his strength. This was his consuming curse. You can't escape yourself, the shadow sneered, her eyes boring into him. But Hector only growled. His claws, forged from cursed essence, tore through the air with a hiss. You're wrong, Shadow. I will not be your weapon. I will destroy you. In a heartbeat, his claws sank deep into the dark flesh. He felt her magic retreating. Each surge of power brought him relief, but not complete freedom. The shadow recoiled, but she remained unbroken. She did not retreat. Then Hector stepped back, standing on all fours. His eyes burned with rage and fury, but he knew the only way to defeat the shadow was to survive. With every breath, he grew stronger. His paws tore into the earth, his breath becoming heavier, more terrifying. He was himself again, a beast in a world full of dark forces. "You live on the curse, Hunter, but you forget it is your enemy," the shadow whispered, trying once more to pull him into her trap. Hector rose to his full height, his body now a monstrous figure that roamed the night. But his mind was clear. He was a werewolf. And in that moment, he realized that only in this form could he prevail. His beastly nature had now become his strength. The shadow could not defeat him because she had forgotten one crucial rule. He was not a victim of this curse. He was its master. Suddenly, Hector lunged at the shadow, his massive paws ripping through the air. This moment was decisive. The shadow recoiled. She could not withstand his fury. In Hector's eyes, a fire ignited. The shadow no longer saw the weak man who had tried to fight her from the beginning. She saw a creature free from fear. He was a werewolf, and it was his salvation. He tore the shadow from her incarnation, filling her with light, a light that had once been foreign to him. "I am not afraid." His roar drowned everything out. And then, he struck again. Chapter 20. The Breaking of the Curse. The shadow began to fade, her black contours splitting apart. In the dark abyss she had created, Hector ripped the last thread of her power away. She fought back, but her magic was losing its strength, shattered by the monstrous force of the werewolf. In his eyes reflected the void, and with each strike of his power, he felt his curse unraveling. The shadow lost control. Hector leapt into the air, his paws shooting towards her. Everything was ending, and in that moment, he felt the curse break forever. The shadow was vanishing, her powers melting away. With every passing second, he grew stronger, until he felt the final thread of darkness snap. The very essence of the curse evaporated into the air. It was liberation. Hector stood amidst the ruins, his body now human again, but his eyes burned brighter than ever. He was free. Chapter 21. The Ghosts of the Past. Hector stood in the shadow of shattered stones, breathing heavily. Inside his mind, the storm still raged, distorted memories of his battle with the shadow refusing to fade. He could feel the werewolf within him, yearning to break free again, but he held it back. His body had healed, but his soul had not. What happened after the victory? That question gnawed at him. He had won, he was free, but now what? He knew that the curse couldn't just disappear so easily. It had left deep scars in his mind, like unhealing wounds. He turned away from the ruined remains and walked deeper into the forest. His instincts were sharper than ever. He felt every rustle, every scent, like never before. It reminded him that he was no longer the man he had once been. There was an essence within him, and it was a part of him, one he could no longer ignore. The nighttime sounds of the forest felt so familiar, but they also carried a threat, hidden, lurking in every tree and bush. Hector knew that the curse had not fully vanished. It had moved into his body and mind, and now he had to face whatever remained after all this. Chapter 22. The beast's return. Hector stumbled through the dense forest, uncertain of his direction. Silence surrounded him, but in that silence, there was a lurking threat. He knew his battle with the shadow was only a part of a much larger game, and he was just a pawn in this mysterious world. Suddenly, the forest crackled. He felt the presence of an invisible threat aimed directly at him, and his instincts kicked in instantly. There was someone hunting him in this world, and now Hector had to hunt them back. As before, his body began to change. The pain and transformation, it was a sign. He knew that a werewolf wasn't just a beast, It was a weapon that could be used, but also one that could lead to destruction. His stomach growled as he smelled blood. Ahead, among the dark trees, he saw a silhouette. Not a human, not an animal, something else. And then Hector realized that his past was still chasing him. He lunged forward, moving like an animal, his body accelerating with incredible speed, and soon he was standing next to the creature. It was humanoid, but its skin was grotesquely twisted, and its eyes burned with wild fury. "Are you following me?" Hector growled, his eyes blazing with light, his claws slicing through the air. The creature gripped him with force, but Hector was faster. With a single strike, his claws shredded the monster's body, and it collapsed to the ground, letting out a painful roar. Hector stood, breathing heavily. The creature had once been one of his enemies, but now he understood. It wasn't just a creation of the shadow, it was his own shadow. He clenched his fists, feeling the rage fill his body. His power was increasing, but his mind was clouded. He watched the monster die, but there was no victory in it. He knew the battle wasn't over. Chapter 23. Dark Eternity. As the fog in his mind began to lift, Hector realized that in a world where he was no longer bound like a dog, he had become the master of the shadow. The curse that once threatened his soul was now his fate. His heart beat with the pulse of the beast, his gaze full of resolve. But he knew he had to continue fighting against whatever remained after his victory. The shadow is gone, but you will keep fighting until you tear it apart for good. This wasn't just a thought. It was his inner voice. Hector understood. The curse couldn't be destroyed without a trace. It wasn't just a shadow, it was an eternity he had to endure. At that moment, he felt a presence again. He understood that his fight wasn't just with himself, but with this world, where evil never leaves, where it's eternal. And then Hector made a decision. He wouldn't hide. He wouldn't run. He would fight until the end. Chapter 24. The hunt for freedom. The night in the forest was dark and cold. The forest seemed alive, ready to consume anyone who dared disturb it. But Hector knew one thing. He wasn't afraid. He felt the same magic that had brought him here. He knew that his task now was to destroy the curse for good. But how could he do that when the world itself was filled with shadows and terror? Hector kept moving, his movements fast, his instincts sharp. Dark entities around him kept hunting, but now he was the hunter, not to hide, but to eliminate those who stood in his way. He was a werewolf, and that was his curse, but it was also his fate. Chapter 25. Resurrection of the night. Hector felt the ground tremble beneath his paws as the dark trees disappeared behind him. In the air was the scent, another werewolf. He knew the encounter was inevitable. He could feel the power of his being breaking through. He was on the edge, and then he saw him. Through the darkness, another werewolf emerged. His power was palpable from several meters away. His eyes burned with yellow light, and his mouth opened in a furious snarl. He was taller, bulkier, but Hector knew that didn't matter. He wasn't weaker. He was ready. They didn't exchange words, not a single moment of doubt. This was a fight for survival. Hector attacked first. His claws cut through the air, and he lunged forward like a bullet, aiming for the chest of his opponent. But the other was faster. His claws tore through the air, deflecting Hector's attack, and Hector felt his shoulders snap with a hellish crack. Pain shot through him, but he couldn't stop. Rage surged through his body. The other werewolf's strength was incredible, his strikes demolishing everything in their path. He grabbed Hector with his claws, lifted him into the air, and slammed him down into the earth with such force that rocks flew in all directions. Hector didn't give up. Pain couldn't defeat him, and he sank his teeth into his enemy's neck as they tumbled across the ground, destroying everything in their wake. "You won't defeat me," his opponent growled, trying to break free, but Hector tightened his grip on his neck despite the pain. But his enemy wasn't weak. He was an experienced fighter, and suddenly his claws pierced through Hector's defenses, leaving gaping wounds on his side. Hector felt his strength beginning to drain. But in that moment, as if in response to the challenge, the beast inside Hector roared like a mad storm. He felt his eyes fill with yellow flames, and his body tightened in a single surge of fury. He gritted his teeth, and in the next moment, his claws sank into his opponent's chest. It wasn't just a movement, it was the final, decisive blow. The enemy, stripped of his strength, collapsed to the ground with a wild roar, his body beginning to dissolve into the dark shadow. Hector stood amidst the ruins, breathing heavily, his heart still pounding, the bleeding wounds on his body still aching. "You won't defeat me, beast. I'll be back," his opponent whispered before his body completely melted into the shadow. Hector stood in silence, shaken by the brutality of the fight, his own body at one point, betraying him with exhaustion. But the victory was his, final and absolute. He surveyed the battlefield, his blood mixed with the earth. But he couldn't stop. The curse still lingered in the air, its traces in the world had not disappeared. "Power isn't victory, it's responsibility," he muttered to himself. The fight was won, but Hector knew the war was far from over. Chapter 26. Darkness and Light. The silence that followed the battle seemed unbearably thick. Hector stood in the center of the ruined glade, his body trembling from exhaustion, yet his mind clouded with determination and rage. He knew that defeating the other werewolf had been only temporary, and the force with which they had fought had left nothing but scars on the earth and in his own body. The curse was not just in his heart, it was in the world. He felt its presence again, the shadow that he could not escape, no matter how deeply he hid it within himself. It felt like a living entity, as cold and unrelenting as the very forest around him. Footsteps. Hector sharpened his senses, his instincts on edge. Someone was approaching. An enemy? And then he saw her. A dark figure standing in the shadow of a massive tree. She was unlike any foe he'd encountered. It was something else. A woman, her eyes burning with a red light, her silhouette almost dissolving into the night. "You," Hector growled, ready for another fight. The woman took a step forward, her movements fluid and confident, her gaze never leaving Hector. "You thought you had conquered the curse. You've only just begun your path, werewolf." Her voice was low, cold, and unfeeling. Hector felt his heart race, his senses heightening, but he couldn't understand who he was dealing with. What are you?" he demanded, his voice filled with fury. She smiled, but there was no fear or pain in her eyes. She stood before him like a true sovereign. "I am the shadow, your shadow." Her voice was like an icy wind. Hector felt his heart tighten. He knew these words were no mere threat. She was something more than just an enemy. "You won't be free. You will never rid yourself of us. We are a part of you." Her eyes flared, and Hector felt his body explode in pain. It was too late. He realized her power was far greater than he had imagined. The moment he tried to strike, she raised her hand, and his body froze. "You are the chosen one, Hector, but you are not the only one," she said, her words the last thing he heard before darkness overtook his mind. Chapter 27. The Fall. Hector awoke in a dark void. He didn't know how much time had passed, but his body felt as though it hadn't moved in an eternity. He was in another world, a place where there was no time, no space, only shadow. He tried to move, but his body was paralyzed. He felt his mind dull, and his very essence was losing strength. "You can't escape, Hector," the woman's voice echoed from the darkness, and he realized she was still near. "I'm not afraid of you, Shadow," he said, struggling to gather his strength, though his voice was faint. You will fear. You will see what real power is." Her laughter rang out, an echo in the void. The shadow enveloped him, and in that moment, Hector understood. His curse was not just tied to him. This was bigger than a personal battle. This was a game of worlds. In that instant, his body transformed again. He felt his skin burn, his muscles tighten. His heart raced, and his essence awoke, ready for the next battle. The werewolf's power returned to him, but now he knew he was fighting not only the shadow, but the force behind it, the force stronger than the world itself. Hector chose his path. He would break free. He would not surrender. His enemy was strong, but he too was a force to be reckoned with. He sharpened his senses and felt the darkness around him close in. Into that darkness, he charged. The battle was far from over. Chapter 28. The Trap of the Shadow. Hector stood in the dark void, his body impaled into the ground, and his consciousness began to fade. With every passing moment, his mind grew foggier, but one thought remained clear. He could not afford to give up. The curse he had been trying to escape was consuming him, and now his only goal was to break free. "You think you can defeat me?" The woman's voice sounded right in his ear. He felt her cold breath against his skin, but couldn't tell where she was. "Shadow, you can't defeat me. I will fight, no matter how much you try to break me." Hector gritted through his teeth, feeling his inner world struggle against the pain she was causing him. The shadow laughed, and her laughter echoed through the void, as though the air itself cracked from her power. "You are so naive, Hector. You don't even understand that you are part of this world. You are part of me. You will never escape me, no matter how hard you try." Her voice grew more confident, and it carried with it an unshakable power. Hector felt his heart pound harder. He heard her words, but they couldn't break his resolve. He gathered his strength, and despite the pain, everything holding him in this trap, he raised his head. "You're wrong. I am not your plaything, and I will not be part of your shadow." His eyes blazed with bright light, and in that moment, his essence pierced the void, tearing it with his claws. "I will find a way. I will find you, and I will break free." The shadow didn't respond immediately. Her silence was more terrifying than any threat. Finally, her footsteps echoed through the void as she slowly emerged from the shadow. "You still won't rid yourself of me. You are me, and you're not alone in this, Hector." Her face remained hidden in the half-light, but her eyes burned with crimson fire. Hector clenched his fists. "You speak as though I am weak. You speak as if I don't know I am capable of more." His voice was full of resolve. He rose to his feet, feeling his strength return. The shadow took a step forward, and her dark aura filled the space around them. "You think you're the only one. You're not the first to try and escape. You're just a part of an endless chain. You're one of the dark stories that exist in this world. All those before you also tried to break free, but they failed." Her words felt like a spell, seeping into his mind. "I don't want to be part of your chain. I don't want to be part of your game, Shadow. I will fight." Hector growled, his eyes gleaming. The shadow fell silent. She raised her hand and slowly moved towards him. With each step, the void around them grew darker, the air heavier. "You can't escape, Hector. You were made to be a shadow. You don't understand who you're dealing with," she almost whispered, her voice soft, yet filled with incredible power. Hector gritted his teeth. He could feel his body brimming with strength. He was no longer the weak being he had once been. He was ready. "Maybe you're right about one thing, Shadow." He took a step forward, his voice cold, but with no trace of fear. "I am part of this world, but that doesn't mean I have to be your slave. You're wrong." And in that moment, when the shadow took a step to consume him, Hector broke free from her grasp. His eyes blazed with bright fire, his body transformed, and with a roar he charged forward. "I will become my own," he shouted, heading straight for her. The shadow flinched, and for the first time, doubt flickered across her face. Chapter 29. Battle on the Edge. Hector could feel his body transforming in the darkness, his power growing with every passing moment. Yet at the same time, he sensed the shadow trying to seize his mind. Everything happening was part of its game, but this time, he was ready to fight not just with it, but with the very darkness that sought to consume him. The shadow stood before him, its face twisted in a smirk. It felt his fury, his strength, and it knew that the moment had come to show him its full power. "You still don't understand, Hector. You are mine. You'll never escape." Her words were laced with cold certainty. Hector growled, flames burning in his eyes, his body pulsing with power, ready to tear through any barrier. "You can't defeat me. You won't control me." He raised his hands, and in that moment, a brilliant flash exploded around him, as if the very energy within him was about to burst forth. The shadow took a step back, her eyes narrowing. She felt the tension in the air thickening. "You have no idea what your enemy is capable of, Hector. You're bound in chains." Her voice grew cold, carrying a hint of threat. But Hector didn't hear her words. He was already in another world. His blood coursed with energy, and he knew this was the moment or never. Suddenly, the air was pierced by a whistle. Hector turned, his eyes widening in surprise. From the darkness emerged another werewolf, massive, its skin shredded, eyes burning with fury, claws sharp as daggers. It was bigger than any beast he had ever faced. This werewolf wasn't just created for battle. It was an entity, born from the shadow itself. "You're one of them." Hector spoke, his voice filled with caution, but also with resolve. The new opponent roared loudly, his footsteps booming like hammers striking the earth. He was almost identical to Hector, but with a wild fury, a thirst for blood and destruction. "I'm not just one of them. I am the shadow, and you will set me free." The beast growled, its eyes flashing crimson. Hector reacted instantly. He leapt sideways, dodging the savage attack. The strike was so powerful that the ground cracked beneath him. "Not so fast," Hector shouted, charging forward with a snarl, his claws extending, ready for battle. The battle began. The werewolves clashed with such force that the ground trembled beneath their strikes. Hector felt his body overflowing with power, his instincts operating at their peak. But with each of his movements, the opponent was fast and deadly. "You think you can defeat me? We are one." The new werewolf growled, his claws slicing through the air, leaving sparks behind. Hector leapt back, dodging another strike, and immediately counterattacked, sinking his claws into the enemy's shoulder. The foe screamed in pain, but quickly shoved Hector away, sending him crashing into a tree. As Hector struggled to rise, the enemy lunged at him with renewed strength. "You will be mine, Hector. You won't leave here alive." The voice invaded his mind like an evil whisper, but Hector wouldn't allow himself to give up. He snarled, and his strength erupted in a blaze of fury. His body transformed into a wild predator, and he charged at his opponent with unimaginable speed, catching up to him, who was too slow. The strike was decisive. Hector's claws sank into the enemy's neck, and he felt his own strength healing the wounds he had sustained in battle. The opponent didn't even get a chance to scream before crashing to the ground, losing his power. The shadow froze. Hector stood on the battlefield, his breath heavy, his eyes burning with fiery light. "You've won." Her voice came like an icy wave, devoid of anger or fear. She stared at Hector, but he knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. "I won't let you control me." His voice was as firm as rock. The shadow stepped back, her eyes dimming, but there was still fear in them, the fear that Hector had broken free from her trap. She disappeared into the darkness, but Hector knew she would return. Now, he was ready. He stood amidst the ruins, his body covered in blood, but he felt it. This wasn't the end. His battle with the shadow had only just begun. Chapter 30. The final ritual. Hector stood in the ruined battlefield, feeling his strength gradually return. He had seen the shadow vanish into the darkness, but its presence still lingered in the air, like a threat that could return at any moment. His body was drained, but his spirit was stronger than ever. He knew this was the final battle, and he wasn't going to lose it. He turned, noticing a few more traces of life fading into the mist. And in that moment, as he turned, a figure emerged from the broken trees. He was tall, with dark eyes and a stern gaze. His clothes were marked with the scars of battle, yet still looked like armor designed for only one type of person. "Hector, you survived." The man took a step closer, his voice deep and confident. Hector responded, feeling a familiar sensation inside him. You're the one I've been looking for." His eyes narrowed as he recognized the man. This was the hunter who had once pursued him, the very same who had tried to capture him. The man smirked, but there was no joy in his eyes. "I was the one who created this cursed world, Hector. I am the hunter you feared, but I can't fight you. You must fight the shadow yourself. You must complete this ritual." Hector felt the tension rising. He knew this meeting meant the end, and it was no accident. "What ritual? What are you talking about?" Hector tried to understand, but something within him already whispered that the end was near. The hunter stepped closer, his face serious, his voice heavy with memories. "The ritual, Hector. You must destroy the shadow. Only then can you destroy its curse, and if you want to be rid of it, you must go through it. Only in the depths of its power will you find liberation. You must be the one to take its power for yourself. You must be the one to complete this cycle." Hector felt the weight of his decision pressing on his chest. This was more than just a battle. It was a choice that would determine not just his life, but the very essence of the world he lived in. "And what happens if I don't choose it? If I don't destroy it?" Hector exhaled, feeling his hands tremble once again. The hunter looked at him, his eyes full of sorrow. "Then you will become part of it. You'll remain with it in this world, never knowing what freedom is. You'll be part of its curse, its tool, and its darkness will consume everything, including you." Hector knew this was his last chance. He understood he couldn't hide anymore from what he had become a part of, and that he had to take responsibility for his actions. He looked the hunter in the eyes and said firmly, "I'll do it. I'll finish this battle. I'll destroy it, once and for all." Suddenly, the air around them trembled, and the mist once again enveloped the field. Hector felt the power pulse through his body again, and he stepped deeper into the shadow. Energy swirled inside him, and now he knew it would serve him. The shadow reappeared, her eyes burning with bright fire, and she looked at him with contempt. "You still don't understand, Hector. You can't leave. You can't win. You will be mine forever." Her voice was cold, but there was a trace of fear in it. Hector stepped forward, and in that moment, the air around them exploded. It became both light and dark, both destructive and creative. Power flared in his hands, capable of destroying the very darkness. "You can't hold me, Shadow. I'm no longer your slave. I'm free." Hector spoke with a confidence he had never felt before. The shadow took a final step, her eyes filled with fury. But Hector was ready. He raised his hands, and bright light exploded outward. The shadow screamed as her body began to disintegrate. Her power vanished like sand swept away by the wind. Hector swung his arms one last time, and everything around them erupted in light. The moment the shadow disappeared, Hector felt all his pain, all the darkness, all the curses vanish. He was free. His body returned to normal. He stood on the field, surrounded by mist. But this was no longer the mist of fear. It was the mist of purification. I won. Hector spoke these words, feeling peace filling his soul. He looked around. Time didn't go backward, but he knew his life would never be the same again. This was the conclusion of the battle, the conclusion of the journey. He was free.